A topic that I'm so glad that I remembered, even though it's like the biggest story in the last 2 weeks in the whole world. Um, Trump is no longer a Twitter user. Um,
Yeah.
do you think that that is, uh, I know people like obviously, I think like 70 million people voted for him. So obviously 70 million people disagree with that choice, but it's totally within Twitter's legal rights to do that. But do you think now that, like the fact that like Twitter has like dictators and crazy people on the platform, that they should sort of keep that same energy across the board for, some of these other people that are doing or have done similar things to what Trump did to get removed? Or how do you sort of look at that as from a legal standpoint of, can other people make a case against Twitter for not doing things across the board?
Yeah. I mean, you've hit on the exact issue that is at the front of all this discussion over Section 230, and are big tech companies taking advantage of the way that law is applied right now to have unfair censorship power. And it's an enormous question. And the biggest issue is like, are they being consistent in how they regulate the content on their platform? And should we modify or revise the law to help make sure that things are done more equitably across the board? It's the kind of thing that you could spend, and people have spent, months debating what should we do about this, because right now basically what Section 230 does is, it's some people feel very strongly that it's the law that allows the internet to operate, because what it does is it says, if you have an interactive service, if you provide an interactive service online, you are not responsible, you're not potentially liable for content that's shared on that service that's created by somebody else. That's what you can argue allows us to have things like Wikipedia. If somebody goes on and edits a page to say something defamatory, Wikipedia should not and can't be liable for that under Section 230. They have that immunity. And if they didn't, then, I mean, the effects of that, there's so many to talk about, but it would make content moderation arguably impossible. And the liability exposure for somebody who's just hosting other people's created content would be out of control. So, I mean, at least that's my take on it. Section 230, the premise of it is a good thing. I don't think it should be totally repealed. I think revisions are appropriate. But that's sort of the basis of it. And in addition to not being liable for allowing content to be up on the service platform, they're also not liable for deleting content. And that's why, to sort of go off on a side thing for a second, that's why when people come to me and say, my Instagram was disabled, can I sue Instagram? The answer is, unfortunately, right now, categorically no, because it's just up to them what is on the platform. And there's other reasons for that, for why you can't do that. The terms of service say they can disable you at any time.
It's
But
like a girlfriend and a boyfriend. You can't sue your partner for breaking up with you.
people have tried that. People have tried that a lot. But
Really?
oh yeah,
No.
yes, people have sued their ex-boyfriends and girlfriends for, emotional distress and breaking up with them and all this kind of stuff. That goes back to the point of, like, anybody can file any lawsuit they want. They may not get very far, but
Thank God I'm in the clear there.
right. But yeah, I mean, the debate around how much power should these platforms have in terms of picking and choosing what stays up and what goes down, it's it's such a complicated question. And I I I think that if you have a standard of what's acceptable on your platform, you should apply it equally. That's a huge task, though, when you talk about how many users are on a platform. How can you possibly police everything? Who is making these judgment calls as to what's okay and what's not? The idea of banning a sitting president from Twitter is obviously a huge moment, and it really puts puts into focus the kind of issues we're talking about when you talk about reforming Section 230 and all that. So I don't know where that's going to land, but it's certainly fascinating to watch.
It's really crazy. It's like the more you think about how big that decision, and not just Twitter, every platform subsequently
Right,
banned
right.
it, including like Shopify. I didn't even
I
know he was
know.
using Shopify. I mean, maybe he was for his
That's
website.
dangerous.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But just the way you just put it, like a sitting president banned from his means of communication with the public.
yeah,
Holy cow! And
yeah. I mean,
Obama was the first social media president, but even Obama, like I know his iPhone didn't even have any apps. Like I don't even know if it had internet access on his phone. He just had the apps that the iPhone comes with, like the health app, the calculator, and then like some games, I think. you know,
yeah.
Whereas Trump was definitely a free soul when it came to what was on his phone.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, just the sheer volume of tweets was like, don't you have a country like, don't you have other stuff to do? I was always just I don't know if impressed is the right word, but like, wow, this guy puts out a lot of tweets.
Honest.
Like,
Yeah, they said at the beginning of his presidency that he would do it from the toilet, but
yeah,
that would mean that he was spending a lot of time in the bathroom.
yeah. Yeah.
um,
But yeah, I mean, I think that decision, especially from Twitter, it was a wake up call for a lot of people to think about the issue of like, look at what these platforms can do. You can just be in a day completely done here on Twitter and other platforms, and no matter who you are. So there's, I think, appropriately a lot of concern about, well, what would happen if a sort of slippery slope argument of what happens if these tech companies just decide they don't like an entire line of argument or an entire viewpoint, and they just suddenly they decide that that's not good for the platform. That's the kind of concern that you get, especially from the right side of the country, the right leaning side of the country. And yeah, I mean, it's just such a complicated issue. I can't claim to be the expert or predict what will happen.
right. Are you familiar with what, like, if somebody is a president, like let's use Obama as an example, um, are there certain levels of immunity that you just get from having been a president, or once your terms are done, you're the same as everybody else? Do you get any special benefits, or can anybody sue you just like the rest?
It's a good question. I don't want to say, I'm always like really reluctant to say what the answer is if I'm not totally sure. I know that, of course, while you're in office, you have immunity from being sued. But in terms of acts that you did while you were in office after your term ends, I don't know the answer to
Yeah, it's crazy. Um, that would be wild if you had immunity for life from being president.
that. Yeah, I think there'd be some bad incentives there for sure.
Oh
But
my,
yeah, I'd want to look it up before I say yes or no, because I know people will call me out for it if I'm wrong.
no, that's crazy.